Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Goolsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
So we're here today with Emily Rushton from Georgia Department of Natural Resources, Wildlife Resources Division. And Emily, I believe the correct title is Turkey Program Coordinator.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep. I also have I also cover fur bearers and ruffed grouse.
Okay.
So I have an assortment of species.
Oh man, you really get to diversify. Think about all sorts of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's an interesting thing as well, because a lot of the fur bearers are predators of turkeys.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And a lot of turkey enthusiasts, really have some concerns about the predator context that we're facing right now. And then ruffed grouse are kind of like a little turkey. So it works.
We just have a lot fewer of them in Georgia.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
For sure.
So before we move on from that topic, where are they? Are they up in the northwest part of the state?
In the mountains. Yeah. We're the very southernmost edge of their range. They're found basically almost exclusively in the Chattahoochee National Forest.
Okay.
In the northeast Georgia.
Yeah, I knew there were some in the Carolinas and East Tennessee, but I wasn't aware that there were still some in Georgia. So that's cool.
Mm-hmm. We're doing some research right now with UGA, trying to figure out abundance and predicting where they are. And I think the strongest predictor of where you're going to find grouse is closer to the North Carolina line. So it's kind of we just get, North Carolina's spillover basically at this point.
So distance to North Carolina is the important factor in the model.
Yep. All the variables that they looked at.
That's funny. Yeah. I'm sure you still have a handful of some diehard ruffed grouse hunters.
Oh yeah, we do have some dedicated hunters in Georgia.
I know a couple guys that chase them in the North Georgia mountains every now and then. Fun bird to hunt.
Yeah, that's cool. Are there any in Alabama, Northeast Alabama?
There used to be. I'm not sure if they have any still or not.
Yeah,
I would think there may be a handful, but I'm not sure either way, Marcus.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get us too far off track, but I'm really curious about them.
So surprised, Emily, we're talking about ruffed grouse today. Hope you brought your notes on that.
Yeah, I didn't know that you also handle that species, so.
I do. The few that we have.
Yeah. Well, Emily, I guess we talked about it before we turned on the show, but we do have quite a few people listening from Georgia, and they're avid hunters, and some of them you might be in contact with from time to time. But folks have been asking us for an update on what's going on in Georgia. So usually when we're talking to folks in positions like yours, we're thinking about some of the high level stuff, like what is the population status, trends in hunting harvest, poult per hen ratios, those sorts of things. So I was curious if we could start off there, and maybe you could, give us some insights on, what the status of turkeys are in Georgia.
Yeah. So right now, I'm cautiously optimistic that our population is leveling out. I feel like we've seen some stability in the past few years. I like other states in the Deep South. In the early 2000s, we peaked and then saw a pretty steep decline. But the past, I would say 10 years or so, our poult per hen average statewide has been about 1.5, which is obviously lower than we want it to be. But out of the past 2 years, we've had a poult per hen ratio of 1.8, which is really exciting. That's higher than it's been, for at least 10, 15 years. And, we haven't had those big drops like we saw maybe 10 years ago. We had some years that were like 1.1 poult per hen. That was getting kind of scary. So I'm hopeful that we're in a period of at least relative stability, even if we're not where we want to be, production wise.
So can I ask you for a little bit of context? If you go back to like the 80s and 90s, do y'all have data on poult per hen ratios that far back?
Yes, we've actually been doing that survey since 1978. So we have a really long-term data set. And in the 80s, it was probably between 2 and 3 poults per hen. And it peaked in like the 90s and early 2000s, fluctuated around 3.5, 4 poults per hen. So yeah, we had a, really big production boom, back in those days, but and then we saw that sharp decline. But like I said, I'm hopeful that we're leveling out a little bit.
Yeah.
So our harvest, so we do a postseason phone survey, like a lot of states do, to get since we don't have a specific turkey stamp or anything. We do a phone survey where we get estimate of the number of turkey hunters and then total turkey harvest. And this past year we had almost 39,000 hunters harvest almost 12,000 turkeys. And that's lower than it has been, so we saw regulation changes where, part of it was designed to like lower our harvest a little bit. But the number of hunters has also decreased a little bit in the past few years too. I don't know if it's because of the regulation changes, but we averaged probably in the past 20 years about 50,000 hunters and probably about 15 to 20,000 turkeys harvested a year. So we're a little bit lower than we have been, but our hunter success has actually bumped up slightly in the past few years.
So for context, what is, like in the early 2000s, what was the peak harvest number at that time? Or whenever y'all's peak in harvest occurred?
I looked it was 2005. We had 76,000 hunters harvested 42,000 turkeys.
Okay.
So that was our peak.
So you said, was it 76,000? Already forgot the number.
76,000 hunters harvested 42,000 turkeys.
Yeah. Okay. So 76, and then what did you say the more recent hunter numbers were?
38,000.
Oh, 30. So it's half.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Has the way y'all keep up with hunter numbers or estimate that changed along that time period?
It's changed a little bit. We've always done the same postseason survey, but so what we do is we give our consulting firm or the statistical firm that we use, we give them the number of big game license holders,
right?
And basically anyone who sportsman's license, anyone who has big game hunting privileges, and then they call and they get a subset of they find out who's been hunting turkeys the past year.
Yeah.
So there's probably some fluctuations that are just due to changes in the license structure, the way we, if we might give them slightly more one year than another year, just based on the data pulls.
But it certainly wouldn't explain that dramatic.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect it to be almost cut in half just from a change in estimation method.
I will say that 76,000 was a big jump. I think the average has been more like 50,000. So we've probably lost, 20% of our turkey hunters.
Okay.
Over the past 20 years. And I think that a lot of that is probably just due to people not having turkeys on their property anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was striking to me as well. Emily, I have a postdoc that specializes in human dimensions, and he has been doing a bunch of research on this topic, and it seemed like what you've seen in terms of the hunter number changes are pretty consistent, at least based on the work that he's been putting together, which we're going to present at the convention if you're going to be there.
Yep.
What I guess when I'm trying to think of what exactly his show, but I think it was around 2010 or 12 to 16, some a swath of 5 years, somewhere right around that, where there was a fairly steep decline in hunters.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about just globally, across all the data that has been published on that. Would you say, is that kind of in that time frame where you saw the hunter decline? Or is it more gradual?
I would say, we didn't necessarily see that steep decline in that time period. But we've had some fluctuations, but it's probably, I would say, fluctuations aside, it's been more gradual. But we did see a really steep harvest decline in that time.
Yeah.
That was I think we peaked in 2013. And then that seemed to be the year, the turning point for harvest. Was it just crashed after that.
Yeah, and that's one thing we've been talking about is, there have been several states that were changing regulations and opportunity, things that affect opportunity at that time, but there also were changes in populations at that time, and we were trying to figure out, why did the number of hunters change? What was it related to? How much of that was on purpose versus, because people don't have turkeys anymore or something like that. So it's really curious. I'm very interested in that because, we definitely, I guess I'm concerned about hunter numbers, making sure that we have people interested in the species and still engaged in wanting to manage for turkeys and the funding that comes along with it. So that's why I'm kind of digging in on that.
I'm very interested in that too. I'm excited to hear the presentation.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll meet your expectations.
Emily, I wonder, and this is, I guess, kind of a really specific question that I would totally understand if you don't have the number at your fingertips, but just having some familiarity with the state of Georgia, having lived there, killed my first turkey there, I gotta wonder I wonder if the decline in harvest tends to have any regional trends, and specifically, I would be curious to know if maybe all the development that's gone on in the metro Atlanta area has contributed to a significant decrease in harvest in that region, maybe disproportionately to some of the others in the state.
Oh yes. Yeah. So the Piedmont, where Metro Atlanta is and continues to spread across, definitely saw the steepest declines in harvest and in pulp production. They dropped precipitously in that region of the state. And you can't talk about the declines without bringing up habitat changes.
Sure.
And the Piedmont is completely different than it was even 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
That's where I live. And there's a new warehouse and subdivision being built every single day. I see something new popping up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I don't know if you'd be familiar with it or not, but the data probably exists. I'd be really curious to see how much habitat has been lost in that general area over the past 10 years, because I bet it's pretty incredible.
It is. We've actually done a lot of that modeling for our swap that's coming up. We've got some interactive GIS tools that are going to be part of it. And if the listeners don't know what the SWAP is, it's our State Wildlife Action Plan. It's a plan for unhunted species.
Will also didn't know what it was.
Oh, yeah.
I actually didn't put together what the SWAP meant.
Well, I
got there before you told me.
I was actually thinking it might be a good thing to explain to listeners what a SWAP is at this point, because I don't think we've ever talked about it on this show.
I don't think so either.
So unhunted species can get federal funding through state wildlife grants. But in order to be eligible, you have to create a SWAP, a State Wildlife Action Plan, and has to be updated every 10 years. And so our 10-year update is coming up. And so it's
a major
basically
undertaking,
a plan.
right?
It's massive. Our wildlife conservation section has been, eating, sleeping, living, breathing the SWAP for the past year. But it's really cool. It's got, the state the status of a lot of these unhunted protected species, status of different habitats in Georgia, actions that we can do to conserve and maintain these habitats. We're going to have a lot of wildlife corridor maps. It's a really, and it's like I said, it's not just going to be a paper document. We're going to have a lot of interactive GIS tools along with it. So, and so, yeah, and part of that is the development that is occurring in the areas surrounding Metro Atlanta and how extensive it has been.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, is that so Northwest Georgia is an area of the state that where we have still pretty good turkey populations.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of the state is west of Atlanta. They've seen a lot of development, too. But our turkeys still seem to be doing pretty well there.
Yeah.
We have one county, Cobb County, which is in Northwest Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only county in the state where we get nuisance turkey calls.
Mm-hmm.
There's still enough turkeys in Cobb County that they, wreak havoc on neighborhoods and, chase cars around. But yeah, the northwestern part of the state, despite the land use changes, we've still got turkeys hanging on.
Yeah. I got to wonder if part of that is being up there kind of in the Ridge and Valley. It seems like those areas tend, across the kind of the Mid-South area, tend to be some of the areas that are holding out in terms of, hanging on to some turkeys. And they all tend to have hardwood ridges and pastures or lawns, I guess, in this case, in Cobb County especially, in the lower lying areas. So it's kind of nice where, turkeys are using the forested area and roosting there and then coming down and feeding out into the more open areas. And I think, I'm glad that we have that. But at the same time, I think sometimes it gives hunters or land managers a false sense that is ideal turkey habitat. And while it obviously is good enough to hold out with some good numbers of turkeys, we could probably do some things to benefit it further. I mean, a lawn is not ideal brooding cover, but it's probably better than just closed canopy forest.
It's definitely better than a parking lot.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that's interesting. I'm not nearly as familiar with that area as y'all are, but I'm more familiar with the southern part of the state. What about in different parts, I guess, outside of that northwestern part?
Well, the southern part of the state, we have seen some declines. They haven't been as dramatic as the Piedmont, but Southwest Georgia, we've actually, we talked about this a good bit. I've talked about it a good bit with our field staff down there because we've got some wildlife management areas that are absolutely beautiful. We've got tons of early successional habitat, tons of brood rearing habitat, because quail is a big focus.
Yeah.
On a lot of these
I think
areas.
about Silver Lake.
Focal areas. Yes. The population at Silver Lake, it was when UGA was researching it, 10, 15 years ago, it was growing, but now the harvest there has declined to just a handful of birds. And we're, this is something we've talked about extensively, trying to figure out what is going on with some of these public lands in Southwest Georgia.
And Silver Lake is one of those.
Is
one of those quail focal areas, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Silver Lake and Chickasaw-Hatchie WMAs are two areas that we've managed really intensively. We've really stepped up our management for early successional habitat. And the turkeys should be doing well. Part of what Chickasaw-Hatchie did get hit pretty hard, and Silver Lake too, from Hurricane Michael. We lost a lot of the hardwoods.
Yeah.
And I think I was actually listening, I think the other day when you guys were talking about the effects of hurricanes and that how it could end up causing roosting habitat to be a limiting factor. And, that's something that we're, looking at is are we looking at the wrong limiting factor on these areas right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've wondered about that. I work with quite a few landowners in the Red Hills region, which for folks out there, if you don't know what that area, it's really quail centric. And I've talked to some of them that wonder the same thing. Is all the brooding and nesting cover you can shake a stick at, right? And in those landscapes that are being managed really intensively, I wonder about roosting and hard mast and things like that, because some of them don't have the turkey numbers that they would like. Other ones do. And sometimes there are adjacent properties, which even get interesting, to try to figure out why do they have them and this other property doesn't.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I would love to do some sort of, survey of the private landowners down there and see what their turkey populations are like. Cause, I'm working on the areas that we work on are very high hunting pressure. I'm intensely curious about what turkeys are doing on some of these unhunted or not as pressured areas.
Right. Well, some of the ones, they're often thousands of acres, and they're killing less than a bird per 1,000 acres easily, and often far less than that, and they still don't. They don't have turkeys like they used to. So it's been really curious for me working with those folks and trying to work out like what's the problem here, because a lot of the times from my perspective the areas are in pretty good shape. I know we've got the listeners that are screaming at us through the speaker right now that it's predators. Those are the most intensively managed predator populations that I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like you should start to wonder, well, what is going on here?
Yeah, I think that's why it's important. We refer to it every now and then, but sometimes I don't think we reiterate enough that, the habitat issues for turkeys, the habitat issues do tend to be centered around breeding cover, I think, in most of their range, but there are some unique situations where that may not be the case, and perhaps this is one of them. Especially when you get to that really low basal area, frequently burned pine, you almost wonder, is there a lack of roosting cover? Is there a lack of loafing or thermal cover, during the day?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But yeah, that's why, habitat or the issues that turkeys are facing habitat wise is definitely going to be site and context dependent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe, Marcus, unless you had another question kind of related to the status of the population, I wanted to take some time to take advantage of Emily's unique position as turkey program coordinator and fur bearer coordinator to get some insight from her about the predator context. Do y'all have much data on how that's changed?
Well, not really. That's something we've discovered, because with the renewed interest in predators, with turkey declines, we realized, we looked at the data and we realized basically what we do is survey our trappers. And so, and our predator harvest, we do have a mandatory trapper survey. So our trappers have to tell us what they've harvested. And it's very tied to effort. So, trappers go up, harvest goes up, trappers go down, harvest goes down, so for at least common species, particularly, raccoons, possums, coyotes. But so we've actually, that's something that now we're looking at, working again with UGA. We have really lots of projects going on with them right now. And the Jones Center at HOA to look at some camera surveys to so we can sort of track. They're going to give us the best methods to track mesopredators over time.
Okay.
I think with camera surveys right now, everything is just it's just gotten so much less labor intensive than it used to be. You can get so much data. I've seen presentations from fur bearer biologists where they put cameras all over the whole state. I think it was Maine. They just threw them out in an array and basically surveyed the entire state. So, I do want, because that's something I hear all the time, predator populations are up. And as a biologist, we could, I can reasonably say that yes, raccoons are doing pretty darn good in Georgia right now. But is their population truly higher than it was 10, 15 years ago? We just don't have those data. So,
and that's common among a lot of states.
Yep. So I think, being able, and, we, all the different, the fur bearer biologists get together like the turkey biologists do every year. And, we always are discussing the best ways to monitor these populations. Cause a lot of states are in the same boat. They'll have just their trapper surveys, or, a lot of them still do, like bow hunter surveys, have archery hunters record what they're seeing, when they're out hunting. And you can get some good data through those, but, yeah, we definitely are trying to get some better ways to monitor these populations.
Yeah.
And we do scent station surveys on some of our areas where we implement predator control. On our quail focal areas, predator management is part, to a lesser extent, it's part of the management for these areas. So we have implemented surveys on those areas to ensure that we're, having an impact on the population.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So, Emily, the one question I had, maybe you can get at it from your survey work. Do you have a sense of, I guess, the trends in the trapping numbers, like how many people are trapping, how intensively they're trapping?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing.
We have probably about 800 to 900 active licensed trappers in Georgia any given year. We sell more trapping licenses because our nuisance wildlife trappers also have to have that. So part of my challenge with the survey is teasing out who's trapping for fur or for predator control or recreation. So yeah, I think about 900. It's remained fairly steady.
Okay. I was wondering almost if there'd been an increase lately, because I feel like a lot of folks are kind of picking it back up again.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see an increase in the next couple years.
Yeah. And does your license purchase, does that capture people that are trapping their own land too, or do they not need a license?
They need it's a no cost landowner trapping permit.
Okay.
A lot of people know that you can trap on your land for free, but I'm not sure if they know they need that permit. And that permit is just so I know who you are, so I can send you the survey.
Yeah.
To try to capture that data.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're out there listening and you're in Georgia trapping, make sure that you get the appropriate permit. So, I mean, that's good information for us to have. We need to know stuff like that to disentangle some of these things that are, correlated with each other.
Well, working with landowners, I know that there are some that instinctually like, well, I don't want y'all to know what I'm doing. But that, they also are looking to us for answers, and we need data like that to start getting at some of these things. Like, how many times have y'all been asked how many trappers are still around, how much trapping is going on, when you get into that predator context discussion.
Yeah, I mean, every time we talk about predator populations, that's that's the way right now that I'm collecting data.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb right now and say that there's more than 800 or 900 folks in Georgia putting steel in the ground.
Yep.
I think maybe multiple times more.
Yeah, Emily, related to that, in your survey, you talked a little bit about distinguishing between different, I guess, interest groups that are trapping for different reasons. So you have a way that you could tell how much of it is like professional nuisance control versus the private landowner that just wants to trap for more turkeys or quail or whatever, versus other interests that might be present, like fur or whatever.
I don't go so far as to ask, are you trapping for are you trapping for predator control or for fur? That is something that we've talked about doing, a human dimensions project, where we do try to get at the motivations for trappers. How can we recruit more trappers? How can we, what kind of education do trappers need? Because we don't have an education requirement. So, that's the, I do want those questions answered, but right now our survey is basically just teasing out who is a NUCO or nuisance control operator, and then who's doing it for any other reason. And there's a lot of overlap there too. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So kind of shifting back over towards our primary topic of interest, turkeys. So what are some of the reg changes you referenced a little while ago? You referenced y'all have had some recent reg changes. Could you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. So in 2021, we have our 2-year regulation cycle. So we update our regulations every 2 years. 2021 was a cycle change year. We implemented some statewide regulation changes for turkeys. That was for the first time in decades, really, that we'd had major changes to turkey regulations. And we lowered the bag limit from 3 gobblers to 2, and we only have a spring season. I'll throw that in there. This is just
so no fall season in any county.
We have no fall season in Georgia.
Yeah,
I was going to ask that.
And no hen harvest.
Correct. Yeah,
Legal.
no bearded hens.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. So we lowered the bag limit. We implemented a daily bag limit of 1 gobbler. We implemented a 1 gobbler per WMA. So if you're hunting on a WMA and you harvest a turkey, you have to go to a different WMA for your second bird. And then, the most controversial regulation change was moving the season opener back. And we did it 2 weeks on public lands from the previous date, about 2 weeks, just based on calendar shifts, and then 1 week back on private lands.
Mm-hmm. So compared to the pre-reg change, that happened in 2021, you said?
Yes, and the first season would have been 2022.
Okay, so comparing 2022 to prior years, or maybe like the 5-year average leading up to that, did you see harvest change that much after those regs were implemented, or did it just shift the timing of it?
Well, total harvest did drop a good bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were at, because we had that COVID bump in 2020 and 2021, really, we had a high harvest, I think it was close to 25,000 birds, and then bumped down to, 12,000 birds. It's been 12 to 16,000 birds for the past few years. So the total harvest did drop.
Which y'all intended to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to, we lowered the bag limit
Right.
and reduced, basically took a weekend off of hunting for people, 2 weekends in a lot of cases. And then, when I looked at daily harvest, because we have Game Check in Georgia where you call in your turkey, and so it gives us daily harvest. It gives us when the birds are harvested. And so, when I look at daily harvest, it's remained it's remained about the same, comparable to pre-reg change.
Okay.
And
in terms of like the same date and the year, or you mean like the same day and the season, like it's just delayed however much
it's just delayed.
60%
of our birds are killed during the first couple of weeks. That's still the same. And then I looked at the average. Average turkeys killed a day over the season. It's been, I think hunters are taking about 250 a day on average over the whole season. And that has not changed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would expect the reduction in days to probably be responsible for the majority of the decrease in harvest, because we see that across a lot of hunted species.
Yeah.
When you cut number of days, you cut total harvest more so than a lot of other reg changes you can make. Yeah.
Right.
I was going to ask you, Emily, you were talking earlier about the number of hunters. How did that change? Did you see a different number of hunters?
Yes. The number of hunters dropped, from, 45, 50,000 down to about 30,000. That's when we really saw that drop. So that was
since 2021?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
But that prior number was probably somewhat inflated by COVID year, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. And then we're asking you to dig deep here on specific numbers, but so leading up to COVID, like 18, 19, where was the hunter numbers then? Was it like, how big of a bump was the COVID?
Yes, actually, the COVID bump was not as precipitous as we thought. It was, it really stayed in that 49 to 50,000 range. It was 2021 that we saw a bigger bump.
Okay.
Interestingly, we were really surprised by that, because our Game Check numbers went up quite a bit during COVID.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that, I don't think people all of a sudden got more compliant about checking their turkeys.
Yeah.
But
so so you're saying there's about the same number of hunters, but they probably just had a lot more time to spend in the woods and they killed more turkeys per individual hunter.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I can't remember now, Will, but it seems like we've talked to somebody else from one of the state agencies that described something similar, but I can't recall who it was now.
Yeah, it sounds familiar, but I can't either.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
it was, yeah, Georgia shut down right when turkey season started. Our governor specifically encouraged people to get out in the woods and go hunting and fishing. So
Yeah.
everybody did.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing. Sometimes it can be too much of a good thing.
Great.
But
we probably did recruit some new turkey hunters that year. Hopefully they've stuck around.
Yeah, and I mean, just thinking of my own job, I don't hunt nearly as much because I have to come into work all the time because I would if I didn't.
It's inconvenient the way that works, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so inconvenient.
So I don't know, Marcus, if you wanted to leave the population discussion, but Emily's referenced a lot of the research that they have going on. I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, like what are you guys working on? Sounds like you're working primarily with UGA and the Jones Center. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
So what kinds of things do y'all have going on?
The Jones Center, we're working on that mesopredator project. But we have our big Piedmont ecology turkey project that we've been working with Dr. Chamberlain's lab for 8 years now. And that's actually this spring is the last field season. We've been
Is that the one on BF Grant and Cedar Creek?
Yes, yeah. Okay. They've been trapping and tracking birds on Cedar Creek, BF Grant, and the Oconee National Forest that surrounds Cedar Creek.
Mm-hmm.
This is going on is the 8th year, if my math is right, 7th year, 7th field season. And we're really proud of that study. It's a very long long-term data set, tracking hundreds of birds. We've learned so much about gobbling chronology. We've had ARUs out on the areas for all the time too. Autonomous recording units, the song meters that record the gobbling. I'm sure your listeners are familiar. But so we've had the song meters out. We've learned a ton about gobbling. We've learned a ton about, where hens are nesting, hen survival, somewhat of an idea of what predators are taking turkeys. But, we've learned that it's really, really hard for these birds to keep a brood alive.
Mm-hmm.
As a lot of these studies have found. But yeah, we've learned, a ton about, their behavior as well. You guys have heard the talks from some of the UGA students talking about, recursive movements off of the nest from the hens, when they take their recesses, the theory that turkeys are exploded leks, just a lot of really neat stuff that goes beyond just us finding out these vital rates and what kind of habitats they're using. So yeah, I'm pretty proud that Georgia DNR has been, has supported this project for all those years.
Yeah, what a great effort especially for the long-term nature of the project. I mean, that's
very unusual. Yeah,
it's unusual, and we need more.
Yep. Oh, weird. Yes, I still, the appetite is still here for turkey research. So I'm currently brainstorming ideas for when we do wrap this project up, what we're going to do next. Because I do want to keep the research train going in Georgia for sure.
That's good. Great to hear. So it sounded like the overarching objectives were to establish vital rates in the populations for that research.
It was, we wanted, vital rates. Timing of nesting was a big one.
And gobbling.
Because we had, timing of peak nesting for our Silver Lake population. And it's actually very similar on BF Grant Cedar Creek, even though they're in a different physiographic region of the state. But
sure.
That I think is pretty comparable to a lot of the Southeastern studies.
Mm-hmm.
And, we wanted to just look at, I think a lot of the movements of hens with broods was a big one. Brood rate, habitat, how, the array on the landscape of brooding habitat compared to nesting habitat, how far are these hens traveling, and is that affecting brood survival? And it is.
Yeah,
the
I would
further
guess
they
y'all are
have to take a
finding.
brood,
Yeah,
the further they have to travel, the more likely they are to get predated. So,
Nice.
yep, I'm at the point now where I do need to. I'm really starting to work on better ways to, Dr. Chamberlain's great about presenting this research to, the public, but, I'm trying to work on some sort of outreach materials for our staff that are working on these WMAs. Say, hey, if you're trying to decide where you want to put some brooding habitat, this is the kind of thing you need to look into. Make sure it's really close to good nesting habitat.
Do y'all have
that's good stuff.
Do you have any already, or are you planning as part of that outreach to have like demonstration areas where you've implemented what you're trying to achieve on your game land? Is that what you got integrated into?
No, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really good idea. I'm going to pitch that.
You can keep that one for free.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a great potential workshop opportunity, taking, WMA managers and people from your private lands technical assistance program out to some of these areas where turkeys have brooded successfully. I think that's a really unique and cool opportunity.
Yeah, and having educational materials available to the hunting community that are engaging with it constantly when they're chasing turkeys. I mean, that's and to have that in place is potentially where you've got, this legacy of data collection. That's a pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've got a wealth of data that I need to make sure that the state is, taking advantage of getting it in the hands of, every land manager that we can.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that's really powerful about that data set that y'all have amassed over that long-term experiment is the vital rates. And, that then gives you the ability to model that population out and see, which particular vital rates, the population growth rate, lambda, that we've talked about on here a lot, is most sensitive to. And then that gives you some ideas about where to focus effort. So I think that's great.
Yeah, really good stuff. We are trying to do the same thing. Long term.
Yes.
Good vital rate data. Yeah,
I've only been in this position 6 years, but I've the amount of turkey research across the whole country has just exploded since I've been in this position, and it's really awesome to see.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
We're definitely about to learn. We've learned more about turkeys in the past few years, and I project that's going to continue for several more years than we have probably in the previous 2 decades.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Are there any other things that you guys have going on, whether it's research or outreach or things that are noteworthy?
I don't think off the top of my head I can think of anything specific that we've got going on. That's we do ban turkeys on quite a few of our WMAs across the state.
Nice.
We ban gobblers to get harvest rates on some of these areas.
So can I ask you a question before you go into that in detail? So are the managers on those sites just going out and trapping in the winter to do that? Or do you have a team that moves around, or how does that work?
I'll hire seasonals, and if the area requests it. So if a certain WMA says, we really want to ban gobblers, but we need some help, then I'll hire maybe 1 or 2 seasonals to send up there. But for the most part, it's the WMA managers. Okay. So it takes a lot of dedication because it's burning season and
a
lot of these areas, and y'all know that trapping turkeys is very time consuming.
Yeah, just layering one more thing on top of everything else the WMA manager has to do, but it's super valuable data.
Yeah, it's also a lot of fun.
It is.
It is. That's the reason we've been able to keep it going. Is once you actually get the net over some turkeys, it's addicting. So,
out of curiosity, Emily, have y'all had any issues with people focusing on trying to harvest those banded birds?
no, not that I've heard.
Okay, well that's good to know because I know some of that's been going on in places.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but I try not to, publicize, hey,
Sure.
this WMA has a bunch of banded birds on it.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's precisely why I didn't ask.
Yeah. I almost asked and I caught myself, and that's what led to my question.
With social media, it's easy to, easy to figure out, but no, as far as I know, people are not specifically going after banded birds. I did have a hunter this past year on one of our WMAs. He hunted a particular opening, and this was actually the opening where we trapped the birds.
Mm-hmm.
We trapped a group of gobblers 4 years ago. He harvested one that year that was banded. And then this past year, he went in that exact same opening and harvested another one that we trapped that day. So, I mean, yeah.
He noticed the trend.
I
always like to put out a PSA, if y'all have banded birds in the area, even if you know that they're there as hunters, don't try not to target banded birds, because it makes us think that, we end up with an estimate of harvest that's biased high. So that gives us inaccurate information that may negatively affect your hunting opportunity. So don't do that.
That's true. I guess if it's more conservative, at least, we'd rather overestimate harvest than underestimate it. But ultimately, if the harvest is too high and you need to do something about it, it might affect those folks that were targeting those banded birds.
Right. But, on the flip side, please also report your band.
Yes. Yeah, definitely do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty important.
That helps us out greatly.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are very, very excited to harvest a banded turkey. So I don't think we've had issues with getting people to report them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're not banding him here, but other than the ones we put a GPS tag on. But I think we've gotten all of our tags back so far in the 3 years of work that we've been doing down here. So it seems like they're definitely really excited about it, and they've also, been forthcoming with making sure that we get what we need out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my experience has been that anytime we put a unique tag on any species and a hunter finds it, they're super excited to know more about it and where it came from, when it was banded, how old it is, all that kind of thing. So I think it's a great way for people to get a chance to participate in science a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep, I do spend a lot of time on the phone in the spring with hunters wanting to know where the bird was banded, when was it banded, how old was it, how much did its beard grow if it's, was a couple years ago. It's it's very gratifying for sure.
Yeah. I've had the experience that a lot of times they don't believe you when you tell them how old the bird was, especially, if it was known age because it was banded as a Jake. And then they're also a lot of times kind of let down to hear, oh, it was banded like a mile and a half from there, or, less than a mile. And it's like not a super interesting story, but that's the way it goes a lot of times.
It was banded in the same field you killed it in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's see. It was 30 yards from where that net was.
Yeah. Good job. Well, I've never killed a banded turkey, so, I think it would be a trophy for me too. I can understand, the value of that and how the cool story behind it, and I'd want to know if it was me.
Definitely.
I imagine you could make that happen pretty easily in Florida, Marcus.
Yeah. We don't do that.
You're going to have to intentionally stay away from those areas where you got some birds banded.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the areas where we have them out, we don't have access to it anyway.
Right.
Because it's on private land or it's a draw hunt or something that I haven't been able to get drawn for. So
right. Well, what else did you want to bring up today, Emily, that we haven't asked you yet? What are we missing?
I think probably the question that I do get asked a lot, this is jumping back to the regulation changes.
Mm-hmm.
I get asked a lot is, are the regulation changes working? And if they're not working, are we going to go back to our old regulations? What are we sticking with these forever? What are we doing? And and what I do tell people is that I am cautiously optimistic that the regulation changes have helped, just based on the slight bump in hunter success that I've seen. For those hunters in Georgia that fill out our postcard survey that we do every year, we ask you how many hours you hunted, how many gobblers you heard, how many you harvested. Those numbers have seen a slight increase as well.
Mhm.
So I'm cautiously optimistic, like I said, that our turkey population is at least fairly stable right now. So I don't see any justification for going back to our old regulations anytime soon, and that's our intent was not to. Our intent was there for them to be as permanent as we need them to be.
Mhm.
We don't plan on switching the dates back. We have no plans to do that in the near future. And we're still, as far as whether they've worked, I think it's a little too soon to tell. It's only been, we've had 3 seasons now with the new regulations. And, as y'all know, pulp production fluctuates a good bit.
Mhm.
Based on weather, based on insect abundance. We had this pulse last year that probably was partly due to the cicada hatch. So I think I want to give it a few more years to sort of smooth some of these fluctuations out and take a look at the data. And before we, make any big decisions on whether or not we're going to do any further changes, to implementing any further changes to our turkey regulations. But we don't have any plans to do anything right now.
Yeah, that is one of the super difficult things about monitoring changes in reproduction relative to something else that's changed, either intentionally or unintentionally, is that annual variation, that up and down in reproductive cycles in turkeys makes it so that you really almost need like a 5-year average, sometimes even longer than that, to get a true baseline for before versus after.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of maddening for
It is.
the hunting community that, they want to know right now, hey, did what you did last year work? And it's like, it doesn't work like that.
Yep.
I was just going to build on your point, Marcus, and say, we see some of these studies in different states where reproduction goes up in the same year and down in the same year, and they don't seem to be similar in terms of habitat at all. There's something, like a weather pattern occurring at a larger scale that's affecting that. So
yeah, across states. I was going to ask you a couple of questions, Emily. So, yeah, sounds like it, you still need to wait and see, and you certainly haven't seen any negative biological things, so there's no reason to change back or anything. But what about are you tracking hunter satisfaction? Do you have a feel for whether or not people like the changes?
Yes, I think we do track on our postseason phone survey. We ask about hunter satisfaction. We haven't specifically asked, hey, are you happy with the regulation changes? Just because, if everybody said it's, I don't want to create a bunch of consternation if everyone says no, they're very unhappy with them. But I'd be like, well, we're still going to stick with them for a little while. But we do ask about hunter satisfaction. It has not been good the past few years. And I think that's, I think it's pretty closely tied with populations. If you're not seeing or hearing birds, if you're not hearing gobbling, then you're not going to be satisfied. I'm not happy if I go out hunting and don't hear any birds gobble. So hopefully that starts to take a turn, an uptick. It's, we have, a strategic management plan, and it has hunter satisfaction is one of our, listed goals, is a certain level of satisfaction. So, that's something I will be taking a hard look at. If it turns out that hunter satisfaction is still in the gutter and, the population isn't helping, then isn't increasing, then maybe we do need to do something else. But right now I'm still in that, let's monitor them for a few years. Let's monitor hunter satisfaction to see if there's any fluctuations there that so we can get a real trend.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to add to that. I've worked with a state agency for a little while and gotten some inside view of this as well, and been a hunter my whole life. It seems like folks are mad if you change anything, and then there's another segment that are mad if you don't change stuff. So people are going to be mad no matter what. It's kind of so you may as well do what's best for the resource. Yeah, and the other thing I was going to add, and Will, I can't remember if we covered it on the air or if it was just in conversations, but it seemed like some other states saw the same thing where there was like an initial an unsatisfactory response, and then over time, at least in one or two cases, I was thinking somebody said that it rebounded, where the hunter satisfaction rebounded, and people were generally happy with whatever it was.
Yeah, I seem to recall the same thing. I can't remember any more specifics than you can, but it does seem to be one of those things where there's an initial, kind of emotional reaction, and then longer term, people settle into the new normal.
Yeah, and they like get happy again.
They get happy again.
That makes me feel better.
Well, they'll be happy if they get more turkeys out of it.
Yeah. So it seems like, well, it's like everything. I feel like in some circumstances there are examples where hunter satisfaction decreases, and I'm not talking about just with turkeys. I'm talking about in general, where hunter satisfaction decreases and then it doesn't rebound. And then there are some examples I know, and I think one of them was with turkeys, that there was initial, discomfort or dissatisfaction, and then it rebounded within a few years afterwards. So hopefully that's the case with yours. I guess
we will see. We shall see.
Yeah, the other is a little bit of a sidebar, but I'm just curious because I know all the state agencies and their relationships with, the other government officials and things in the state. How does that work in Georgia in terms of the decision making? Do you have a commission, or is it going through the legislature? Like how's it structured?
We have a board. We have like a framework in that's in statute, that's in law, and then within that framework, we have a board, and so that can set regulations. So we every 2 years we recommend our regulations to the board, and they're generally they work with us really well and are generally receptive to the changes that we have that we recommend.
That's pretty similar to most places.
Mm-hmm. Some of our, interestingly, all of our trapping laws are in statute. We can't really make changes to our trapping laws without going through the General Assembly.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Which is that's that's an anomaly.
Are there any trapping laws that y'all been interested in changing?
Yes, we have an out-of-state forfeiture. Like, if you want to be an trapper from out of state in Georgia, you have to get this, I think it's $2,000 forfeiture bond.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it really prohibits out-of-state trappers, and we want non-resident trappers to come trap in Georgia. Mm-hmm. I've talked to people from other states who are like, well, I really want to, this property wants to hire me to come trap, and I can't, and without getting spending all this money on this bond. So things like that we would like to clean up. Yeah.
What about in that case, would that apply to a landowner that lives in a different state? Or do you have ways around it like that? Like if they have their own land? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just really curious.
No, it's okay. I don't know how that would work if you own land in Georgia. I think it's the state of your I know for if you own land, say you're a Florida resident, you own land in Georgia, you still have to get the non-resident license. I think it's the state of your primary residence for trapping as well.
Yeah, I could see where folks would be upset about that.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that probably most of those folks are not being counted in your trapping license numbers.
And they're also going to be in our DMs after this.
They will. Sorry, Emily.
Oh,
we
it's
know
okay.
we know you have to deal with it. Yeah, is there anything else that that we need to ask you about, or that you want to talk about, or?
Not really off the top of my head, unless you guys can think of something else.
I think those are most of the questions I had.
Yeah,
really
we
good
covered a lot of
overview.
ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, hopefully sometime in the near future, when you start getting some of those materials put together and everything, we can have you back. It was certainly really fun talking to you. And this, again, was, long overdue episode. We've got a lot of folks from Georgia and that hunt in Georgia, maybe not from there necessarily, that have been interested to hear from you. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us.
Yeah, thank you, Emily.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was great talking to you guys. And, if the hunters, send y'all some crazy questions that you feel like I might be able to answer, send them my way.
Yeah, we'll put you in touch.
Definitely direct them to you. Are there other resources that we can link in the show notes, like poult per hen survey, or resources that folks might want, or that you might need data?
I can.
Collection.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we do take observations from the public. We have a survey for poults per hen. We have, I mentioned our postcard survey that we do, or like our avid hunter survey, where hunters fill out their postcards every year. We have that online as well.
Okay.
So I'll send those links, and we also have.
So folks could volunteer to turn those in. You don't have to necessarily contact them.
No, I mean, it'll just, if you hunt those hours that the hours that you hunt, each hunt is, a line of data for us.
Yeah.
And it's greatly appreciated. We've got some hunters that have been doing it for 30 years and are really awesome about it. Dedicated. And then we've also got, some like, I put a dashboard together, which is like an ArcGIS term. It's
really
just
cool.
Like a way to
You've shown that
visualize
to
data.
me before, and that's a really cool tool that y'all have.
Yeah, so we've got some of these dashboards where you can visualize like the harvest data and regional poult per hen data. So I can link those as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Is there a way for hunters to participate in the poult per hen survey in Georgia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, there's a link on our website, and we usually put a link at the beginning of summer. At the beginning of June, we'll put a link on our Facebook page, on our Instagram, all of our social media.
Great.
Nice. Cool. Well, again, we really appreciate your time. We appreciate everybody out there for listening and all the support. It's been really awesome, and look forward. I assume you're coming to the convention, Emily?
Yep, I'll be there.
Yeah, so look forward to seeing you there. And I guess if folks out there are coming to the convention, Will and I will also be there. So take some time to stop by and see us if you have a moment.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.